We've talked about finding the greatest common factor. Now we're going to talk about factoring polynomials that are in this form. ax squared plus bx plus c when this number equals 1. You know, math teachers are lazy. Math people are lazy. And we like to take shortcuts when we can. And one shortcut that we take is not putting a 1 in front of a variable. We just like to make a rule that everybody understands that there's an invisible 1 in front of a variable when there's not a number there. So you would see directions that would say factor each polynomial completely. And you would be given something like this. ax squared plus x minus 12. And you would factor that, okay? So let's talk about what we're doing when we're factoring. In the last chapter, we did what we called the full method, where we would take two factors and we would full those out. We would multiply x times x, x times 3, 6 times x, and 6 times 3. We would then combine the like terms in the middle. Okay? What we're doing when we're factoring is we're undoing that full method. We're going in reverse. We're starting with this, and we want to come out with something like this. Okay? So for this particular problem here, we want to ask ourselves two questions. What two numbers are going to multiply to equal negative 12 and add together to give us 1? Now let me tell you where the negative 12 and the 1 are coming from. Negative 12 and 1. Because as we know from the full method, we would combine the like terms in the middle to get this number. We would have multiplied two numbers together to get this number. So start with what multiplies together to give you negative 12. Now let's think about positive and negative numbers when we multiply. In order to get a negative number when we multiply, we're going to have one number that equals a positive and one number that equals a negative. So let's go ahead and put our parentheses down. Okay? Let's put a positive sign and a negative sign. Okay? Let's think of those two numbers. Let's think of the numbers that multiply together to give us 12. We've got 1 and 12. We've got 2 and 6. And we've got 3 and 4. Okay? Now, let's think about this part. Let's think about the adding part. We know one of our numbers is going to have to be positive, one of them is going to have to be a negative. When we add them, we're going to get positive 1. That means the bigger number is going to have to be positive. Okay? You may already see it. So, this is the bigger number, this is the bigger number, this is the smaller number. So does negative 1 and 12 add together to give us positive 1? No. Negative 2 and 6? No. Negative 3 and positive 4? Yes. Bingo. Those are our numbers. Okay? So let's put them correctly here. Anytime we have just an x squared, the two things that multiply together to give us x squared are x and x. Okay? Now let's fill in our numbers. The positive 4 and the negative 3. Or we could write it like this. That's also correct. Not this. Now, why am I saying not that? Why can it not be x minus 4, x plus 3? They multiply together to give me negative 12, but do they add together to give me a positive 1? No. So that's why it can't be this. It's got to be this or this. Okay? Let's do another one. So let's do x squared minus 10x plus 16. X squared minus 10x plus 16. Okay? So ask yourself the question, what two numbers are going to multiply to equal 16 and add to equal negative 10? Always start with your multiplication numbers. So we're going to list the numbers that multiply together to give us 16. Okay? Alright, we know some things about these numbers. They multiply together to give us a positive, but when they add together, it gives us a negative. So how can we get positive numbers by multiplying? Either we've got to have a negative times a negative or a positive times a positive. Because they add together to give us a negative, this tells us that both numbers have to be negative. Okay? So we've got to multiply together to give us positive 16, add together to give us negative 10. Alright, let's start listing our numbers. 1 and 16. We add those together, does that give us negative 10? No. How about negative 2 and negative 8? Yes. Those add together to give us negative 10. So our factors are, we're going to have an x and an x, because we've got x squared, negative 2 and negative 8. Let me show you one more kind like this. X squared minus 6x plus 9. Okay. We're looking for two numbers that multiply together to give us a positive 9. Add together to give us a negative 6. Let's think about the sign of those numbers. Multiply together to give us a positive. Add together to give us a negative. They're both going to be negative. Okay? So let's start listing the numbers that multiply together to give us 9. 1 and 9. 3 and 3. Negative 3 and negative 3 add together to give us negative 6. Okay? So those are our factors. This is a special one. Okay? We got x and x because we had x squared minus 3 minus 3. We can also write this in a different way. We can write it to be x minus 3 squared. Okay? This kind is called a perfect square trinomial. Remembering trinomial means 3 terms. What makes it a perfect square trinomial is this is a perfect square. This is a perfect square. Half of this number, or the square root of this number, is 3. Okay, these are twins. And they add together to give you the middle term. Okay? Your book's going to show it to you as a certain pattern. You can factor it just like a normal number, but it helps to realize that that kind of trinomial makes a certain pattern. So that's factoring when we have an imaginary 1 there for A. Okay. Next, we're going to do factoring when there's another number in front of x squared besides 1. Those are a special kind too.